I'm Addison. I serve in Davenport, Iowa with Rick's House of Hope, Center for Grieving and Traumatized Children, working at capacity building, grant writing, to help support our groups, including individual counseling sessions and support groups for kids dealing with all kinds of grief and loss. I'm originally from Cincinnati. I went to Miami University, so go Red Hawks. That's about it.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia, and if you can't hear me in the back, just tell me to speak up. I'm a little nervous. But I am currently serving with Reengage Dubuque in Dubuque, Iowa. And before I tell you a little bit about my placement, I guess I should tell you how I got to where I am today. I was born and raised outside of Chicago, in the northwest suburb. And from the time I was little, my parents just pushed me to be in every sort of activity that I possibly could be in. And with that, I kind of grew up not knowing where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do next because I liked doing everything. So in college, I changed my major once, added a minor later along the line. But upon graduating, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I stumbled upon the AmeriCorps, Public Allies, and so that's where I am today. I currently work at Reengage Dubuque. I work with students that have dropped out of high school, and I help to engage them onto an educational path that works for them. So sometimes it's having them actually go back into the high school, working to get their diploma. Sometimes they work on online courses, and other times it's working on their HSED, which is the new GED. It's high school equivalency diploma. And along with that comes breaking their barriers and really helping them to be successful in all aspects of their life. Work with a lot of at-risk youth. Some of my students are still considered kids, and they have kids of their own. So working with them has been very fun, but yet challenging, and I really enjoy the work that I do. So.
My name is Taaron. I've spent my AmeriCorps term so far with Unity House of Davenport. Unity House is a nonprofit organization, and they serve men who are recovering from addiction and alcoholism. They have 7 transitional houses throughout Davenport, a total of 65 beds. Throughout my term, I've worked on a variety of different things. I began my term working on the planning stages for the women's house that Unity House plans to open in the future. So I was able to dive in and do a lot of research on other transitional houses for women around the state of Iowa and beyond to kind of lay a base work for our future women's house. I quickly learned the processes Unity House uses to operate on a daily basis, so I was able to take over most of the clerical duties in the office. And then I began working on one of the largest aspects of within Unity House, which is doing the interviews to get our prospective clients into Unity House. So I've been doing that. That is probably one of the most rewarding aspects of my job, just because I get to work one-on-one with our potential clients and hopefully make a difference in their lives. During my term, I was able to develop a monthly newsletter for Unity House. It reaches approximately 350 people throughout the community of the Quad Cities. And I was fortunate enough to gain the task of planning and putting together Unity House's 10-year anniversary celebration, as well as just recently we held our very first silent auction fundraiser, which was a huge success. So I learned a lot of valuable skills dealing with data analysis, marketing, community involvement, and capacity building. And overall, so far, it's been really rewarding, exciting, and it's been a great learning experience.
I'm Rebecca Munshank. I'm serving with Operation Threshold in Waterloo. I have lived in the Cedar Valley, north of Cedar Falls, for a decade. I got my bachelor's degree in French with a minor in Women's and Gender Studies from UNI. I didn't really know what I was wanting to do. I am almost done with my master's in communication, also from UNI, so go Panthers. I have been working at Operation Threshold with a youth program. It was a youth leadership and employment program. Some of the challenges I've run into was getting participants for the program, so I did some marketing, I rewrote some curriculum, And now I've been in the evaluation stage of trying to find out what it is exactly that the youth trying to target want or do or need. So it's been pretty rewarding. I don't know what the next step is, but I'm looking forward to it. And I've been given the task of introducing our group. So as it is, everyone leads advancing new leaders. So we're going to be talking about millennials in the workplace. We're going to talk about serving millennials. We're going to talk about some of the different generations and what those definitions are. We're going to have an activity, which will be fun for all of you folks, and then we'll have a discussion and Q&A at the end. So let's get it started.
You might be a baby boomer if you remember Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat on December 1st, 1955.
Or if you were part of a new era of rock and roll brought on by Elvis Presley.
If you spend your Saturday mornings watching this, there's no sound. So I probably should have checked that. But this is what happens to me.
It's so funny.
It's almost funnier than that.
This is a use your imagination audio. You might be a baby boomer if your attire sometimes consisted of poodle skirts and bell bottoms.
Oh yeah, if you remember the first artificial satellite being launched into space.
You might be part of Generation X if you remember the assassination of music legend John Lennon.
If one of your very first toys was these,
If you remember the discovery of the Titanic shipwreckage.
If you ever memorized some of these dance moves. Do you even play this?
yeah,
Yeah.
sounds, but
Do we even play this? Is that a question?
it's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's right.
If it's this or
Yeah.
Also something
And you might be part of Generation X if you remember hearing the devastating news of the Challenger explosion.
you might be a millennial if three of your best friends in grade school were named Harry, Ron, and Hermione.
If you remember exactly where you were when the attack on the World Trade Center happened.
If you were afraid of Y2K.
If a Giga, Chia, or Furby was your very first pet.
Or if you remember the inauguration of our very first African-American president.
So, there are many generational differences amongst people you work with or amongst the people that you serve. There isn't always a clear definition about what ages and what your birth years fall into which generation. So just for a general guideline, the baby boomers, 1946 to 1961, Gen X, born between 1961 and 1979. The tail end of Gen X is really fluid. We've seen from 82 to 78. I'm in 79, so I'm going with that. And then millennials, 1980 to 1995.
All right, so here we have a couple of differences between millennials and people that were considered Generation X. So millennials are there are currently about 82 million millennials in the United States today, and that makes up the largest population since baby boomers.
On the other side, Gen X is a relatively small generation in comparison. There's about 52 million Gen Xers in the United States. Gen X also experienced America becoming a little more diverse. They live through the acceptance of diversity. Millennials were born into diversity, so it's just kind of a given to a millennial. Also, something that Gen X experienced, their identities were shaped by disappearance and fragmentation, a lot of children of divorce, challenge explosion, the AIDS epidemic, and then the creation of video games and television. Cable television.
And although Gen Xers were shaped by many negative experiences, millennials have been shaped by both negative experiences and positive experiences, including events like 9/11, reality TV, social media, and the growing issue of global warming.
Gen Xers tend to be highly individualized people. They have a strong desire to create new rules and have their voices be heard.
Millennials, on the other hand, are highly informed on social issues due to technology, the education system, and parental involvement in their lives.
Gen X grew up when technology was evolving, and so we came in on the very beginning of it and have had to learn as technology has evolved.
However, millennials have experienced technology from the start. They've grown up with electronics, and mostly all millennials experience and use technology on a daily basis.
Gen X celebrated some of the first stages of gender and other social equalities.
And millennials are also the first generation of people to enjoy equality from their very start.
On the other side, Gen Xers strive to keep up with the times and to extend their youth because our youth was a lot shorter than millennials based on some of the issues mentioned sooner, so a lot of us had to grow up pretty quickly. Tired.
And millennials today are experiencing a longer youth stage. So it's because of this that they have a greater desire to grow up and experience more within the workplace. They have a high desire to achieve their goals and be taken seriously.
Now we're on to millennials versus baby boomers.
Okay, so the millennial generation is slightly larger than the baby boomer generation, and the millennial generation is much more diverse than the baby boomers.
Baby boomers are a lot more likely to have a firm affiliation with a religious group or a specific denomination,
Whereas millennials are less likely to be affiliated with a particular religion. Both groups agree that Social Security really needs to be maintained for the future, but most millennials don't believe that they're going to get it.
And baby boomers tend to be a little bit more into the idea of marriage, and were more likely to have been married younger and to have pursued education goals and work goals after getting married.
Whereas millennials are less inclined to get married at an early age and are more likely to pursue their education and achieve career goals before marrying.
And while a lot of baby boomers do know how to use technology, certainly by now almost all of them do, there's still definitely some who are trying to catch up, and some who just really don't care about it. Let's be honest.
Whereas millennials grew up with technology and they're extremely literate with various technological devices. Okay, so we're going to get into some myths about millennials.
So maybe the most prevalent myth I think that's out there about millennials is that they are constantly connected to technology, can't get away from it, can't kind of remove themselves from a screen, that the only way to communicate them is through text, the only way they'll ever get into a meeting is through Skype. But interestingly enough, based on a major survey that came out pretty recently, 3 out of 5 millennials actually prefer face-to-face communication to any other type of communication, which is actually right in line with pretty much all the other generations. So while, sure, texting might be a great easy way to kind of get into touch with people, particularly millennials, they certainly still like to have that face-to-face communication. And another thing to keep in mind just when working with millennials is, sure, they might have Facebook up, they might be on Twitter, but social media can really be a boon to a lot of smaller companies, a lot of smaller nonprofits especially. It can connect you to people within your industry, and it can really help you connect to your clients even more efficiently and effectively.
The second myth that we would like to take a look at is that millennials don't have a work ethic, and it's not quite that they don't have a work ethic, it's that they have a different work ethic. For the most part, millennials are entering the workforce in an economy that isn't doing too well. And as we said earlier, the millennial population is a lot larger than in the past. So those two tie together when you have more people entering the workforce with a poor economy. Doesn't align very well. So it creates a very competitive job market for millennials. And as a result of this, millennials are forced to take jobs that they don't always want to take. I know when I graduated college, before Public Allies, I went back to retail. It wasn't a job that I wanted to take, but I needed a job, and so I took it. And that's kind of what millennials are facing today. And it's not that they don't want to work, it's just that they would rather work efficiently. So for millennials, long hours don't necessarily mean a lot to them. They would rather do something where they can achieve more. They're very achievement-oriented and want to do things where they're going to produce greater outcomes in a lesser amount of time. They want to be very efficient with what they're doing. And this also brings up another part of millennials. They want to be at work, but they also want to do things in leisure. They want to be spending time at home with their families and their friends. So they try to be efficient at work so they can enjoy life outside of work. As workers, millennials want to complete tasks and move on to the next thing. Some can even get frustrated when a boss or a supervisor might require that you put X amount of hours into a specific project because they can get their project done ahead of schedule. They don't feel that they need to put that many hours into something. And beyond that, they really just want to achieve their goals and do it as effectively and efficiently as possible.
So we have millennials are unmotivated. Millennials are actually extremely motivated individuals. However, they do require flexibility. So millennials understand the importance of the work-life balance to a much greater extent than previous generations before. So they really want to strike a balance between, their work life and their personal life. So from a very early age, millennials have understood the importance of having a life outside of work. Their personal and professional tend to blend with this generation. The expectation is that employers will accept the lines are very blurred, and that as long as work is being done, as long as the quality is there, that their managers should take a very hands-off approach. As the Bentley University research reports, millennials have not rejected the corporate world, but they will seek other options, such as starting their own companies, if they can't find the workplaces that accommodate their personal values. So on the other hand, though, they are loyal to companies that allow them to stay true to their personal and family values. So for business executives, it's especially important to provide a working environment and a company culture that supports a healthy life-work balance, and to provide the technology that allows millennials to really collaborate from wherever they happen to be.
Myth number 4, millennials are narcissistic. Actually not true. They're a very socially conscious generation. They care about making an impact. Volunteer rates are up, and so are applications for service-oriented careers like Teach for America or Public Allies Iowa AmeriCorps. They're also huge advancers of equality and tolerance, gay marriage, interracial marriage. They've also proven to be the most philanthropic. They've donated to various charities, even though millennials may be earning lower salaries than other generations. One of the core values of a millennial is passion. They tend to flock towards service-oriented jobs and tend to leave jobs where their passions for helping aren't being fulfilled. The stereotype of them being selfish, it's attributed to these malleable social media identities. They can craft their ideal selves, their ideal perception, cultivate these mass followings. There are also a lot of escapist gaming techniques where players can be heroes and superstars and athletes, and it's just, there's this perception of you're just this other person. There's also been the notion of everybody gets a trophy. So, there's that thought of, well, everyone's got to feel special, everyone's got to be this great person. The other thing too to keep in mind is every generation has a bad reputation from the previous generations before it. The biggest difference is that millennials have a greater chance of projecting their individual selves compared to previous generations. Social media, internet, apps. So it's just, they seem more narcissistic, they just have better ways of expressing themselves as individuals.
This one goes along a little bit with what Rebecca was talking about. Just the idea that, sure, millennials may be a little bit more self-confident than some other generations due to some of the things we were talking about, perhaps kind of the more recent parenting styles of Gen X parents. But you have to also consider that millennials, especially when entering the workplace, are coming in with an average net worth that's only about 68% of what generations before them average. So sure, they might kind of feel entitled to a few different things, particularly a living wage, merit-based promotion, pay equality across genders, but I don't think necessarily these things should be considered entitlement or narcissism. But sure, some people do view them that way. Wow.
I am actually going to tag on to what Addison said just because I missed a little portion of mine. And part of the second myth that they don't have a work ethic is that they don't want leadership. Not that millennials are narcissistic, but some things that they don't always agree with is that you have to pay your dues. They want to have leadership, but sometimes millennials feel that their skills and assets should be utilized to their fullest from the get-go. They don't want to have to push papers and things like that. They feel that if they have the skills to use technology, if they have the skills to create relationships and do all those things, that they should be utilized from the very beginning. So I guess I will transfer into benefits of having millennials in the workplace. As individuals, they are intrinsically motivated, cost-effective, genuine, driven, they think outside the box, and they are educated. And when I say millennials are intrinsically motivated, I mean that they want to grow and they want to learn. They want to succeed and do whatever it will take for them to get where they want to be and achieve their goals. For most of them, they don't work just to work and get a paycheck. They work because they want to, and it feels good for them to contribute to society and to make life better for other people. Millennials are also cost effective. It's because of their desire to work that sometimes they'll work for a wage that is below what they could be paid. They're just so eager to help others that they'll take a job doing that. And they're also willing to be flexible, and they like personal recognition, and sometimes they'll work just because it makes them happy. I think we all work because it makes us happy, but that's a big factor for them. Millennials also thrive on being judged. So to them, it's about respecting and those that have experience, and they prefer to work in inclusive environments, and especially appreciate bosses and supervisors that work with them. Millennials are driven. Over half of millennials deeply evaluate the ability to move up in their career, and they're also more attracted to careers in which they can do so. They are eager for responsibility, and this drives them to become more invested in their jobs, and it drives them to do a better job. They will do all that they can to prove their worth to their supervisors. And millennials also think outside the box. It's because of their world, it's constantly changing, so it forces them to be creative, and they always come up with new ideas and are willing to think abstractly. And finally, millennials are educated. So far, millennials are our most educated generation in the workforce, and a large majority of them have bachelor's degrees.
I'm going to talk about millennials as a team. They optimistic, they're flexible, and they value feedback. So this generation really has the stereotype of the me generation, but it's really not true. In fact, in the office, other generations were dubbed the me generation, but millennials have actually been graced as the we generation. Millennials are generally great with teamwork and collaboration as long as it helps get the work done at the best possible quality. They are tenacious. Millennials are often known to be impatient, wanting everything right away, and that's kind of to be expected when we've all grown up with the World Wide Web and we have all the answers at our fingertips all the time. However, this makes millennials tenacious in the workplace, and that constant working towards finding answers and getting things done as soon as possible. They're optimistic. Despite the not-so-stellar economy we're experiencing, millennials are the most optimistic generation yet, and they're always looking on the bright side. They kind of think that they're going to be able to do whatever they want, regardless of the barriers that are in place. And millennials are actually the least jaded generation yet, because they believe they're capable of anything. They are flexible. As Forbes staff writer Caleb Melby highlights, we are taught to think if something has been a certain way for a very long, there's a possibility that it's no longer good enough. So we're constantly working against stagnation and towards new ways of thought. So that also makes millennials very flexible and used to change, and they tend to kind of roll with the punches. And lastly, they value feedback. Millennials need acceptance, and they need to feel validated. So a lot of people may view this as a negative aspect, but it can be great in the workplace because millennials need the feedback, and they will listen to the constructive criticism you give them and use it to better themselves.
Another benefit to having millennials in the workplace is, getting back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, technology. They have grown up with it. It's something that has always been a part of their lives. They had computers in their elementary school from kindergarten on. They're the first generation that really had it on a daily basis all the time, and technology is becoming much bigger in the workplace. So it's good to have tech-savvy workers to come in and maybe help those generations that are more reflective with technology. And social media. Obviously, millennials have this reputation, which we debunked, about always being on social media. But since they've grown up with social media and they understand it a little more than other generations, they also understand the potential that it has to spread your message, to spread awareness, to really do something bigger than themselves and to get the word out about the things that they're passionate about, they're working for. The other thing, too, about millennials is they're very ethical. They have a greater desire to do good. They think it's important to work for a company that is ethical, even if it means earning a lower wage. They want to do something ethical. They're also very charitable. They're very enthusiastic about donating to charities, volunteering their time, and being active in their communities. As an employer, if you hire a millennial, you're going to bring someone in who's a great face for your company. And probably the greatest thing about it is they really care about the bigger picture. Yes, they have this perception of being, isolated or in their social media, but they believe that if you can improve society, then that's going to be greater than any sort of financial good. They don't necessarily want to just change the office or on the local level. They're thinking big. They want to change the world.
One thing we wanted to talk about a little bit is just the importance of client input in providing the best services as possible. And I know we're all experts here, and we all think we know exactly what all our clients need at all times, and what's exactly is best for them. But of course, this is not always true. And in order to best serve our clients, we really need to learn what they need and what they want from our services. And by surveying the community, having learning conversations with individuals and researching other programs, we can really find out exactly what your client base needs. And millennial skills that we just went over here are really well suited to doing exactly this and helping your organization find out what clients really need. So we'll see.
I'm sitting in a local coffee shop when I witnessed an event that got my entire attention. A young man around his mid-20s entered the shop to buy food for a homeless man that was waiting for him right outside. Right after after the young man left, I felt the need to approach the homeless man and ask him more about what just happened. He told me his name was Taaron, and that unlike me, he was not surprised to see young people giving him a hand. Zenon tells me firmly that the people most willing to help him are young adults in their 20s.
I'm a scary black cat.
In the past years, many popular television shows have stereotyped millennials as a self-absorbed generation that focus mainly on their devices and social media. However, as millennials have become adults, their life goals and values have started to show up.
I have been volunteering for youth groups, like being a leader, going on youth camps and in my church. And I've done 4-H camps in the community before as a counselor.
I have participated in social work since I was in high school, and we usually teach people to the basic things like reading, writing.
According to the 2014 Millennial Impact Report, 87% millennials donated money toward a nonprofit. The report also states that 47% of 1,500 millennials had volunteered from a cause or nonprofit in the past. The appeal of pro-social activities to millennials is deeply connected to their core values: happiness, passion, diversity, and sharing.
The young generation, they seem to be more open, even like earlier generation, the Canadian from Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Venezuela, Ecuador, they seem to dance in Mecca.
With the launch of shows such as MTV's Rebel Music and Agents of Change for MTV Latin America, millennials are making sure that future generations will also remember them for their pro-social nature and their continuous fight for what they believe is right.
So as you can see at the end of the video, they touched on 4 common core values of millennials, and those were diversity, passion, happiness, and charity. So diversity is something that millennials have grown up with. Since the time they were born, they have been submerged in it. They often accept and embrace diversity and welcome it into every aspect of their lives. Millennials are incredibly passionate individuals. As you can imagine, the majority of us in this room are millennials, and we wouldn't be here if we weren't passionate about making a change within our communities, and that is exactly what millennials focus on doing. They truly believe that they can make a difference in the world, and they can change somebody's life and be a positive impact on those in their community. Millennials also strive for happiness and want a balance in their life. They want to not be bogged down by all work and no play. Millennials feel that service work is a very large component of being happy, and they feel that giving back to their community brings them that happiness. And finally, millennials are charitable. They have been proven to be one of the most charitable generations, and although they might not have the bank accounts to support it, they still find themselves donating money and time and resources to things in their community that they're passionate about. And they do so with little worry about student loans and things like that. And more, they are getting involved in their own communities and seeking jobs that specifically deal in charity work.
So with the 4 core values, millennial workers are perfect individuals to throw out to the community and really have those learning conversations with your clients to find out what they actually need. Millennials are passionate, and that passion will resonate with clients, and millennials have the qualities to make their clients feel heard and make them feel important. More importantly, millennials want to do this type of work. It's important for them to find a career that's fulfilling, and and they will enjoy going to work each day and leave work wanting to come back. So finding out what clients really need is such a huge and important aspect of nonprofit organizations. Why not put the best people to the tasks?
Then I would actually like to speak to that a little bit first before we move on. One of my fellow public allies, she's in Dubuque with me, and through her organization, they are doing community dialogues. It's an equity profile, and through networking with her, I've been part of the community dialogues, and helping to facilitate the dialogues has been a wonderful experience that I've had. We started with economic well-being. We've also focused on education, housing, and we also touched on health, and we'll focus on transportation and a couple other things. But being out in the community and actually asking the clients and the community what they need and where they feel there are gaps, I think will lead community members and people that are making movements in Dubuque. It will lead them to do so much more because they're actually asking their community members, how do you feel about health? Where are the gaps? What can we do? And all of those fixes will come next. We're just taking in all the information right now, but it's really been a wonderful process to be a part of, and hearing what's working well for community members and what's not working well. So I think that's a wonderful way to figure out your clients' needs, is just to ask them what's working well and what's not working well.
On the other side of that, I just wrapped up doing some surveying of people who work with young people to find out, okay, so I've been focusing on this aspect. Is there something I'm missing? So I sent out a survey. I've been processing the survey because we don't have all the answers. And sometimes the answers are out there and we just have to go find them. So I had some really interesting results come up in my surveys. I was asking school workers and social service workers, what do you see as these needs being for the people, the young people that you work with? And so I've come across some things that definitely need some more looking into, some issues with health, and especially with health, that was really surprising. But that isn't something I would have considered. I've been dealing with leadership and employment. So it's given me a chance to look at some things that may not be related on the surface, but okay, this is something that has to be met, this need has to be addressed before we can move on to the next step. So it's been really good to get out there and be inquisitive and figure out, okay, we've got this, let's go deeper. Let's find out what's underneath that so we can get everything to the top.
So I want to talk a little bit about working with millennials in especially a nonprofit work environment. And research really shows that progressive companies keep millennials in the workplace by offering them ongoing trainings, consistent feedback, and immediate rewards for jobs well done. And often millennials are really unresponsive to the do this, do that style of management. I'm looking at you, Emily. I'm just kidding. They do tend to be very open with their feelings. They might be willing to talk to a CEO directly about kind of how they feel about their workplace, which doesn't necessarily kind of mesh with earlier generations' idea of workplace hierarchy. So it can kind of be aggravating to the 50-year-old managers who haven't kind of grown up in that style. So a couple tips. I think these kind of go for any kind of management of anyone, regardless of generation, but tell them the truth. Don't try to kind of hide things from them. Explain why you're asking them to do something. Reward them for jobs and assignments well done, as we kind of mentioned. Praise them in public. Give them regular feedback as well as recognition. And strive to make the workplace as fun as a workplace can be.
And I'm going to speak on engaging millennials. As Addison said, make the workplace as fun as possible. That's one thing that they're finding, is that millennials want to be working in their communities with their coworkers and volunteering and really being outside the workplace with their coworkers and building those relationships. Most millennials are attracted to jobs, not only because of what they produce and sell and distribute, but because of the relationships that they're able to have with people while they're actually at work. Most of the time, they look for an office culture that is engaging, and they really look to work at companies that align, that have their mission and beliefs align with their own mission and belief. And most of the time, millennials stay at their jobs because they're passionate about what they're doing, and because of the bonds with their coworkers.
So how you would retain a millennial. Millennial workers are not very company loyal, but they are innovative, creative, and tech savvy. So to retain them, you need to offer them benefits that they see as valuable to maintaining their lifestyle, and adjust your management style to get the most out of them. So offering a variable work schedule, flexible hours, or working from home goes a long way towards attracting and retaining millennials. Flex time lets employees, avoid rush hour traffic, go to their child's event, go surfing. Many millennials feel flex time and telecommuting make their lives better. Evidence shows that cars, cell phones, laptops, and sign-in bonuses are becoming common benefits. It's a competitive market for employers, and they're challenged like never before to hire and retain younger generations. So they have to be creative. Millennials are highly proficient with email, texting, Skype video, calling, blogs, forums, and virtual online workrooms. So they really don't see the need to be physically present to be able to collaborate and get their work done.
So for the next portion, we're going to do an activity. And so first we'd like anyone that, from the beginning of our slideshow, that identified as a baby boomer, if you could raise your hand, and we're going to number off 1 through 5. So maybe I'll do, okay, baby boomers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay.
And if anybody, and then next would be if you identify yourself as Gen X, to raise your hand. Okay. And then the rest of the millennials, raise your hand.
All right. So pretty much the directions are simple. You guys all have relatively the same amount of cups at your table. So we'd just like to give you the next 5-10 minutes, kind of depending on how we feel and how you guys are doing. And your challenge is just to build the tallest cup tower as possible with what you have provided for you. So,
How many cups you got first?
It's not a hard line, of course.
It is a giant table. Yeah.
All right, so how shall we do this? Just stack them all up. Can you?
But I don't know.
We all know the truth.
Oh yeah, that might be the.
It's got to be the tallest, though, right?
Yeah, but if you build a nice base like that and you put that on the top,
Yeah.
we just have to have a strong enough
The
base.
antenna.
I don't know, though. This is starting to guess. Yeah, it's kind of wobbly.
Like that or whatever.
Yeah, keep
Yeah,
going.
we would have to make them really wide. Let's does anybody else go the farthest? Yeah. I think we should just take, Okay.
You all are cruising over here. Hey.
No, I'm just experimenting.
Nobody breathes too heavily.
Well, paper would be a nice base in between the cups to prevent blood from flowing.
True.
If you start
We got
there
that.
and then you go up, for example, like what he's doing, and then We can use paper in between, it would be stabilizers.
Oh yeah. We wrap this thing up.
Yeah.
We're gonna avoid your. No. Should we let them or no? You guys can all grab a seat if you want. I can't tell this.
Who's taller? Is he taller?
I don't know. That's innovative right there. Who came up with that one? Was it a millennial?
I like this design. Okay, this is why we know.
If you could just take some time, answer at least one of the questions. If you want to answer two, knock yourself out. And then we'll give you a couple minutes to do that, put some thought into that, and then.
Before we get into the questions, we just want to take a second. We'll go around the room, and maybe if you guys could just have one person talk from each group, but we just like to kind of hear what your thought process was as you started building your cups, where you started, kind of what that whole process looked for you.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, who won?
Really important. I think logistically, you guys had the tallest cup tower. I think creatively, the middle table really thought outside the box on that one.
Answer the question.
I do want to say too, this table up front, when I was walking around, they said, "Can we use the cards?" I said, "Can you?"
And they used them.
And they did.
That's what we want, right?
You wouldn't creativity award,
Sorry.
Did you push it?
Is there one group that would like to start first?
I think with us, I don't think we were too concerned about the competition. I think we were more competing with ourselves to try and create something. So I wrote down for mine as like for the third one, what went well for our group was that we didn't really focus on winning. Rather, we were more focused on trying to build the most structurally sound tower that also had height, which didn't work out for us with the time limit. But I think for us, it was kind of imagining it that way. Almost in a sense, like we'll build the best one we can build, and if someone else builds a really tall one that falls over, then we have the added luxury of one that won't. And so we may win that one. But we weren't really thinking necessarily about winning. It was just more like, what can we come up with that'll just stand? So.
All right. On the other table, the process that went along. Yes, Christopher.
For number 2, what challenges did you have to overcome? I said that standardizing different methods, because we were all kind of scattered and we were all just trying different things. And so eventually we were like, oh, okay, let's just combine all these different things. But it was, a hurdle to overcome that, which is often, that's very applicable in the kind of work that we do.
One of the other tables. Yes.
I'd like to answer this question at the bottom.
Okay.
I think something I learned from this activity, which is really relatable to, I think, work life, and when I have a task or something that I need, a project that I need to accomplish, when there's a very clear goal, it's easy for me just to want to dive in. I have a tendency to be very hands-on, and I think that what I learned here, and especially relating to what we're talking about, working among different generations of people, is that it's very easy to dive in and get hands-on, and I wish that I would have maybe tempered that a little bit and done more to reach out and start asking for feedback sooner, because that time just flew by, and we worked on, I think everybody kind of just started doing their own thing within their own comfort level, but what I learned is that it's important for, myself as an individual to seek that feedback sooner in the creative process, because some people's comfort level is
not being hands-on, but maybe taking an outside perspective, standing back and looking in, and that perspective also is really valuable.
Take it back.
Okay, what was your name?
Mira.
Mary. Okay, Mary was awesome. She was like, okay, let's make sure that our tower, if it's taller than everybody's, let's not add any, because, you know, we don't want to mess it up, we don't want it to fall over. And I think it's so funny because my mentality is like, no, let's add another one, let's add another one. But sometimes that's not good. Sometimes it's good to step back and say, no, you know, we need to step back and look at, you know, the safety or the kind of feasibility. And then you three, I don't know your names, but you three, like, they were just like, okay, let's do this. And they just started doing. And the first thing I did was Google. But ultimately, you know, that's how, you know, I just thought that was really good because it shows that all different generations have different things that they bring to the table, and those strengths can be utilized in the workplace very well. And I really didn't care who won, but it did help me figure out if Mary was right to say, no, let's leave it the way it is, or if it was let's add more, you know. But yeah, that was fun.
Yes.
I'd like to add that with this group is like number 5, 4. Yeah, 4. The team effort. I answered number 1 in terms of communication and how we communicated. It was communication where everyone was respectful and listening, and then someone would speak, and then we'd kind of size it up, and then we'd step back, and then someone else would add to it. So it was that team effort of utilizing everyone's strength, but then that listening was really key.
Yes. Table number 1. What did you guys?
Well, I answered number 3, and kind of piggyback off to what Christopher said. It was like a trial and error type of thing. It was like, let's try this. No, it's not going anywhere. Well, let's put this on there. So and listening kind of worked out with that too.
There was one thing that I really liked. I think it was what Colton said about how it wasn't about winning for them. It was just about building something that was strong and stable. And I think that's kind of almost a theme that came out through our presentation about millennials, is that they are often trying to create things that are stable and are strong and are steadfast and lasting. And it's not always about winning, but it's about helping each other and help me help you. So I just really thought that was a great point, and I wanted to expand on that a little bit.
I like the fact that you guys touched on listening, because I think a lot of times people think, okay, I've got to talk to someone, that's communication. Listening is just as important, maybe not a little more important, because if everybody's talking and nobody's listening, how tall are your towers going to be? Just tall. Allowing the exchange, allowing the openness of ideas, that's key. And I also like too what you guys said about knowing when to stop. That was something I don't even think we considered when we were discussing this and discussing doing this together. I think that really is key in taking back to what you do. Don't get in a rush to build the tallest tower if the taller you have works. You know, if it's not going to fall over, say, well, keep going.
Did anybody else want to reflect on any of these questions or the experience that they had?
Yeah, I think I didn't answer number 5, but just kind of looking at that, this isn't necessarily something from this activity, but it may have been something that other people kind of picked up on. For me, in the kind of work that I've done at my placement and the people that I worked with, I realized like the differences between the generations isn't exacerbated as people make it seem, right? I think that it's more just a cop-out for maybe frustrations that people have with people who are younger than them or maybe older than them. But when we were here, it didn't even break down that way. We were just kind of working through, and like, we had a goal, we were working towards that goal, and at no point was it, oh, well, you're too young to understand how to do this or whatnot. Like, the first thing that was brought up was, is anybody an engineer, right? So like, had one of, Tim or I been an engineer, right, it would have been a millennial that had an engineer, or that would have been an engineer, had someone else been, would have been from a different generation. So it wasn't even like worrying about like the negatives or something. We were like trying to find a positive in that. We would have probably relied on the expertise of that person. I think a lot of that happens either in our placements or at other organizations, where a lot of people just want to lean onto the people that have that knowledge. And whether you're a millennial, whether you're Generation X, or you're a baby boomer or anybody else, I think that when things are going well, people are going to rely on those strengths. And I think it's only when people are really upset or frustrated or something that's going on at their workplace that then, it's because they're old and they don't understand technology, or it's because they're young and they don't have any wisdom or anything else. I think that that's more of the thing. It's more about like a frustration than it is an actual problem.
Yeah,
More
that was
than one
cool.
generation.
That was really cool that one of the more generationally diverse groups won too. I think that kind of goes back to say that there's not maybe all these barriers that sometimes people want to create.
I think, like you said, though, I think it's a cop-out.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes back to the myths that we touched on earlier.
It's very easy to make excuses or to write someone off as they're young, they're just stuck on their phone, or they've been doing this a million years, they're out of touch. I think those differences tend to come up when you run into barriers in the workplace, but sometimes you run into those barriers because of those sorts of thought processes. Maybe one or two more, and then we'll just open up for general questions for the four of us. Jason.
One thing we practice on Union 4, but it's after I get to try and have fun. Even though we had a task even in your workplace, when you have a task at the end, you can easily lose yourself and lose kind of your motivation, your drive, things like that. So to kind of keep it fun and just kind of ride with it, I think is important kind of thing to always think about. Especially when you're working in a workplace in your real life, you just kind of keep that so that you can kind of keep your passion and interest or your drive and things like that to work with whatever you're working on.
We'll open it up for questions for us then.
Yeah. I'm going to make sure you guys have answered your questions. All right. So, I know that the dates you guys came up with were the different generations were kind of fluid, right? That each one, it's more kind of the culture that you're in that separates the barrier, I guess, more than time. But you guys listed millennials as 1980 to 1995, which I think, again, is we can stretch that, we can move it. But I think we can probably all say that we do now have a new generation that's involved in, and I think a lot of these generations necessarily aren't time, but experience with technology, experience with events. Each one has that event they remember, and I think that our new one is, I don't know what we'll call them, some marketing person will probably end up giving them a name, but it'll be the post 9/11. I mean, the this year's entering freshmen are the people who get, so there we go. But they're the ones that don't. Yeah, but they're the ones that never experienced, they weren't alive when 9/11 happened. There's not that association, just like a lot of the millennials don't have the association with the Challenger, and then you have JFK assassination and then other events that move on before there. So I guess even though I think each new generation is more closely related to the previous generation, but there will be significant differences. So how do you think that we should start to appropriate them as they enter the workplace in the first of them in 4 to 8 years?
I think that's a really good question, and I think that your group almost sort of touched on that by saying that it wasn't that you were paying attention to these generational differences. I think that not by ignoring generational differences, but by realizing that somebody is from a different era, that was born in a different generation or has experienced different things than you. I think that's one way that you can recognize their strengths and how to be effective in the workplace, and just working together and not really placing those barriers with saying, well, you're a millennial, I can't work with you. I think that by recognizing that somebody who's experienced other things than you, then you can play on those experiences. I know that my younger sister is Generation Z and I'm a millennial, so working with her and talking with her and collaborating with her is going to look different, and I just have to recognize that there are those differences and bring in their strengths and what they have experienced.
And speaking as a Gen Xer working with a lot of millennials and my fellow allies, it isn't that I haven't seen or experienced the things that they've experienced as far as life-changing events. It's just that there's these other things that came before. And so just keeping that in mind, that like even when we're putting things together, like we were trying to define, okay, if you remember this, you're this, and it's like, well, yes, but no on that one. What about this one? Here's what I remember. And just sort of keeping an open mind is really key to a lot of this.
I don't think we know what the strengths of Generation Z will be yet. I think we're just learning what millennial strengths are, because we're just, in the last 10 years entering the workforce and really knowing what we're all about and what we like to do and how things are for us. So as soon as we kind of put a better framework for Generation Z, I think we'll just need to embrace those strengths.
Any general questions? Anything?
I was thinking about earlier in your presentation when you were talking about attributes of the millennial generation. Had you shown that, except for perhaps some of the technology, 30 years ago, to those of us baby boomers who grew up in the 60s, 70s, and what the attitudes were then, at the end of the Vietnam War and post-Vietnam era, sentiments were very similar. And so just because we have grown up, we have had, of course, more experiences under our belt, doesn't mean that we haven't been there.
Right.
And I think that's just something to keep in mind, too, with young folks when you're relating to us older folks, that, yeah, it was like that then, too. And everybody felt that way, who was, I think, from that generation. Yeah, we thought we were on the cutting edge and that we had some great new ideas.
It's a cyclical thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just different experiences as when you're raised, I guess, and what your opportunities are, because that makes a huge difference.
Yes, I just really wanted to point out that I really liked that you brought out the difference in socioeconomic status of Gen X or of millennials, because I think it's very true. More and more people are doing education, but less and less jobs are available for educated people, and so it's really a conundrum, I think, and ultimately a challenge for people who are getting education and not getting jobs to pay. And that's just a really interesting point, because it leads to the mentality that people are lazy when really they're really worried. People want a job that they care about, not just anything necessarily.
And it's funny because we've kind of talked about it. I don't think any of us in the industry and retail want to go back to it, even if it's just a job. That isn't fulfilling. It's going to pay the bills, it's something for you to do, but that's not going to get you here.
Thank you to our presenters for sharing your passions.
They are.
And your expertise.
They are. That's why I wanted actually.
Thank you to those of you who came, to supervisors who have been mentoring and coaching these presenters, these allies for the last 10 months. We appreciate your support of the allies. To community action staff, thank you for coming to learn about public allies and learn about the differences in millennials. Because in nonprofit and corporate environments, there's just this attitude that millennials aren't valuable, so they're not invited to the leadership table. Staff at organizations don't recognize their gifts and assets, and job positions are offered to other individuals. At Public Allies, though, we believe everyone leads.
inherent to this belief is a few assumptions that everyone, millennials, clients, individuals you serve in your community, have gifts, and those gifts have to be contributed in order to create change. We believe that the potential for success is not determined by education or previous work experience. It's determined by assets and gifts. And millennials and people you serve in your communities have those assets and gifts. So thank you to our presenters for talking about how to include millennials in the workplace and how to bring out those assets and gifts and the benefits that millennials have in the workplace.